Okay, welcome to this week's episode of Hashtag Leadership What's on Your Mind. Remember, our main aim is to add value to your leadership journey by inviting great guests with great stories or experts in their field. So today we're speaking to Dawn. How are we doing, Dawn? You okay?
Hi, good, thanks. You?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. So Dawn is the MD of Tranmere Rovers, who's very close to us in our location, our origin here on the Wirral. So Dawn, I'm not going to add anything. I know you've got some exciting things coming up in 2021, but to start off with, the people who don't know you, as I hit the 20-minute timer, introduce yourself to people off of you.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me. So my name's Dawn Tolcher. I'm currently Managing Director at Tranmere Rovers Football Club, and that oversees all aspects of the football club, including a lot of the non-football activities, which is not the traditional stuff people think about relate with football clubs, and I'm sure we'll come on to talk some more about that. And then I've just co-founded a new organisation called Liiift with a friend and colleague of mine, Sean O'Neill, who you've interviewed previously.
Yes, he was on
And
the early stages.
yeah. So we've come together to see how we can support local businesses and local people, particularly at the moment when it's not an easy time.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so obviously we're Hashtag Leadership What's on Your Mind. What comes to your mind when you hear the umbrella term leadership?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think sometimes people think leadership is related to a job title. And for me, it's never really been relevant to that. Quite often, environments I'm in, I don't often introduce my job title at Tranmere and what I do, because I think if you're going to be an effective leader, it's not necessarily about what's written on paper. I think leadership's about how you can inspire people and how you can lead them to deliver a common vision or goals or the best. And I think another really important part of leadership for me is belief. And it's belief in what you're trying to achieve, and it's believing in the people you've got around to do that, and also leading them to believe in themselves to achieve it as well.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. And that reference to that label, it's not a label, and you can be a leader at any level of a business as well, can't you?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So just focusing on you, are you aware, whether it's conscious at the time or on reflection, about where your personal leadership journey started?
Yeah, reflecting on this ahead of today, I think leadership's probably a little bit innate in me. And when I look back now, it did start at quite a young age. So my first career started in sports development and sort of working on various programs to sort of deliver. And in the Wirral it was again. And even at the time, I didn't have many managerial responsibility, but I recruited a lot of volunteers and a lot of key people and developed networks within the area I was in to deliver what I was trying to deliver. So again, coming back to my description of leadership, it's about putting good people around you, giving them a steer, giving them goals to achieve, and making sure that we all bring out the best in each other to achieve that. So that started quite young for me. And as I say, I didn't have any direct managerial role to be a leader, but I ended up with a big network around me. And that just then sort of was my first run in terms of enjoying it, enjoying working with people. I get a massive kick out of developing people. So at that point, you get young people come through saying, I want a career in this, or this is what I want to go into. And my initial response would be, how can I help them? How can I help them achieve their goals and get to where they want to be? So I've been fortunate through my career then to move through a variety of roles. I did some event management, which when you talk about leadership, it's absolutely critical in that environment because you've got time scales to hit, you've got structures, and you can't be 30 seconds out either way. So I think I've been fortunate to have roles that when you say your leadership style develops, you just learn a bit more bit by bit, which helps how you react to the next situation, and you get to understand people. And then, a big thing I would say is nobody's the same. If we're all the same, we wouldn't do the job. And it's understanding how you bring out the best in people, but then allow them to be themselves as well.
Yeah, I love that. And again, just when you were saying that description, then the complete opposite of that is being a micromanager, and that's come up in a couple of things recently. I've been talking to people about. So how do you make sure you do what you've been explaining, and not go into the over possessive of systems, processes, people? Have you
Yeah.
experienced that before?
Yeah, I think there's a time and a place. I mean, I'm definitely not that sort of leader, but if anything, probably recently and COVID, you do every now and again need to demonstrate that sort of, we hit a pandemic, people needed some guidance, and sometimes even if you don't really know the answers, you had to be quite forthright in your instruction. My way of dealing with it is, my most common question asked is, what do you think? So people will come in and say, oh, this has happened, or that's happened, or this hasn't gone right. And I'll listen and I'll listen. And then quite often my first reaction will be, and in my head is spinning with like, I want to do this and let's do that, another. But I'll try and stop myself and say to them, so what do you think we should do? Or what do you think? Because I try and always pull out the solutions from people rather than me telling them. Because question you often get in leadership is, what's the difference between leadership and management? And I don't see it that clear cut. My job is to develop leaders so that they lead their own departments or they lead their own organizational plan or things like that. So the way I do that is try and, let's say, that coaching sort of approach, and push the challenge back a little bit to see what solutions they come up with and work through them together.
Yeah, because ultimately you're not then making robots, you're making
No.
empowered people around you. And you
Yeah.
just reminded me about something I talk about quite a lot, that in education we get a lot of experience in, or a lot of help in reading, writing and speaking. You mentioned the big word there, listening, about the
Yeah.
listening skill of a leader. And it's really important. So tell us on your reflection of your journey, and this is why I was excited about getting you on, because we've had a couple of coffees, and I know that you've done lots of things. Where have the challenges come from in your development? Because I sometimes talk about, obviously we've got amazing guests coming on, and again, you haven't just arrived at this point with all the things that you're doing. So tell us a little bit about some of the lessons learned and the ups and downs you've had in your journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think one recommendation or thing I always say to people is, if you're going to be a leader, you need to consider all your stakeholders and your stakeholder management. And I tend to use a phrase about purposeful leadership, and purposeful leadership is that it's looking at your stakeholders, it's looking at yourself and your moral side and how you behave, and then the vision and what you're trying to achieve. But coming back to stakeholders, it's easy to avoid them. And if you look at many different industries, if you're in a sales industry, people can just think, right, I need to keep the customer satisfied, and how do I keep them, because I never keep them happy, they keep buying, the sales keep coming in. Where I've never worked in very clear-cut environments. So if you use football, for example, there's numerous stakeholders, and Tranmere Rovers has done a great job of developing its portfolio work, which means you have numerous stakeholders to involve with that. So to me, that's a big part of leadership, of making sure that it's listening and it is that communication, but it's thinking across the board. So if you've got children in an elite athlete program, for example, it's not just about them 16 athletes, it's about their parents, it's about their families, it's about the accrediting bodies, it's about the event organisers, it's about the safeguarding. And you have to sort of make sure as a leader, you've got a thorough understanding of each of those stakeholders, and what your decisions you're doing, what you're driving on a daily basis, how does that affect each of them stakeholders? So we use the football club at the moment in terms of the pandemic. The fans are massive for us. They're a massive stakeholder in any football club. And the relationship, the dynamic is completely different at the moment. So how do we make sure that we address them differences, and that stakeholder relationship isn't affected long term? You know, another one in public, I've always kind of dipped in the public sector world as well, is that you have funding. So your funders are a stakeholder, and how do you make sure you're satisfying what they do, keeping your quality of services? So I think sometimes as a lead, it's making sure that all of them are pieced together, not just directly thinking of the staff I've got in front of me as it stands now.
Yeah, also there's a couple of things that I was thinking about when you were saying that, about, I talk about the bridge between operational and strategic. So you're always
Mm.
zooming in, zooming out. And we're going to go on to a little bit of what we were talking about before, but it's communication, 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 and it's that bringing everybody into the loop. So yeah, we were chatting before about what you're seeing in the current environment. And I'd like to sort of share some of the things that you're seeing and how you're overcoming it, or offering support for people to do something over nothing, which is one of my other things.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's really difficult time for everyone. And I think I think a challenge for me in my role is getting that balance of business as usual. I think in March, when this happened, none of us really anticipate. I certainly didn't anticipate. You know, as a leader, you realise things you say, and someone recited something I said back in March when football got called off, and it wasn't a great quote. I said, "Don't worry about it. As quick as these things come, they go away." And walked out, and that was me trying to reassure everyone, keep them positive, make sure they're okay. And how wrong could they have been? So I think it's that balance of business as usual, but it's not usual business at the moment, and then taking into account people and their individual circumstances, how that's working. But I think what is important and has been critical over the last 12 months is your strategy might change, but your vision hasn't changed. So, for example, for Tranmere, one of our big focuses is to be a true community club. We do a lot of work for the local residents and things. Now, that hasn't changed, that vision, but our strategy has massively changed in the last 9 months because we've had to think differently. Yeah. And I think ahead of today, I spoke to a couple of people because, you know, leadership is such interesting area of work. So I spoke to a few people about what their thoughts on leadership were, because that's my style, Stuart. I don't know a lot. I don't know everything. So I talk to people. And then I did ask a couple of people sort of, what would you describe my style of leadership? And one that probably really was quite a positive one, someone said, is you explain everything. So you make decisions. You don't shy away from making decisions, but you make sure you explain to people why that decision's been made. And when I reflected on it, I thought, yeah, it is important. You can tell anyone to move something from A to B and they'll do it. You know, a hierarchy of an organization will do it. Whereas I try to say, right, move it from A to B, and this is why you're doing that move. This is why we're doing it. And this is how it fits in with the vision. And this is how it helps the organization, or this is how it helps you. And I think that's been absolutely critical over the last 12 months, really, when you don't know what the next day is going to bring. Sort of football fans have been in, they've been out, they've been back in. There's community activity. We run an education program for over 200 students, and you're educating them virtually. But what I've tried to maintain is that ethos through all of it is, right, this is why we're doing it, and this is why we need to change. And a lot of people say at the moment they're confused, the guidance isn't clear, they don't know what they can and can't do. And I've just tried to make sure from a leadership point of view, we're clear, we know what we're doing. But coming back to what I was saying, our vision hasn't overly changed, just our strategies had to adjust.
Yeah, do you know what? I love that, because that's come up on 2 other podcasts, and that's why it's really nice for me, because you're getting like-minded people who are really passionate about leadership and know, and it comes across from just hearing you. It's that you've got that self-awareness, and it just made me laugh about when you move that box from A to B. I bet you'd be really open to feedback about that person maybe seeing another option of how to do it. And, have you thought about this? Because it's that thing, isn't it? We only see what we see. And great leaders are open to having more experienced people around them, people to add value. And like you said as well, you can be a jack of all trades, master of none, but you've got the masters around you as the people in your team.
Yeah, I mean, Sean, that we were talking about before, we did a little exercise over Christmas of what would be our 10 rules of leadership and sort of what we both worked towards. And we did it separately and then came together. And both of us had a very similar one on that of, you know, mine was, you don't need to know everything. There's so many aspects of running a football club I haven't got a clue about, but I don't necessarily need to know them. I just need to have people around me and enable them and believe in them to do the job they best can for the organisation, which I learn off them. And it's interesting you've picked up on that, because that is one of the cultural things I've tried to bring in, of that there's no bad idea, and trying to develop a culture where, well, let's try it, because what's the worst that can happen if we're not if there's no reputational, there's no financial risk, let's try it. Because to me, then what we've got is a workforce of people who will come up with ideas, will be creative, will think outside the box, to use the phrasing, rather than your quote before of becoming mini robots and waiting for instruction to do as they're told.
Yeah, because you obviously you're going to go a lot further
Yeah.
with that. So it's something that we've talked about before on the podcast, but how, in your sort of perspective, how do you attract the right people?
In terms of from a workforce recruitment point of view?
Yeah, yeah.
Probably one of the biggest compliments I've had about my leadership style was doing a recruitment, and somebody who'd worked for me for a while said, if you work for Dawn, she'll always bring the best out in you. And I've tried to sort of pick up that. So in terms of attracting the right people, qualifications, unless they're critical, so unless there's something you actually need, it's great. But to me, it's about attitude, and somebody who wants to bring that positive attitude, wants to bring that development. And in terms of what I do to try and attract them is I just try and be me, really, and from the off be that person of how I'll manage them. So I'm not more important than anyone in an organisation. Sort of one of my favourite leadership, and don't often quote things, but one of my favourite leadership sort of quotes and references is the Kennedy Space Centre, when the janitor gets asked what does he do, he says, I put a man on the moon. And that's very much an ethos I work with, of that sort of we're all part of the jigsaw. I've always worked in environments where resource has been quite lean, so whatever role you've got in your organisation, you should really need them. So if you really need them, make sure they know you really need them, that they don't feel that they're just a sort of spare part or a tokenistic, or I just clean the floors, or I just put the bins out, or I just do this, because without them, you wouldn't be who you want to be. So in terms of attracting the right people, that's what I try and make sure is that, like if I ever do interviews, I always start off with a strong introduction about the organisation, the role, and who we are, because I think, one, it naturally settles people in interviews rather than going straight in for the tell me about you. And secondly, it's important that, I say to people, you need to make sure we're the best employee for you as much as you're the best employee for us. So making sure, again, it's a very mutual relationship, rather than I'm going to sit here, interview you and decide whether I think you are right for me. It's got to be very mutual, is my view.
Yeah, amazing. So do you want to give us a couple of minutes? We've got about 3 minutes left. It flies by, I know. Do you want to give us a couple of minutes about some of the things and in a bit more detail about what you're doing this year? It sounds fantastic.
Yeah, so Liift's been set up to sort of look at how we can support local businesses or individuals. So a big passion for mine and Sean is developing young people as well. So as part of it, we're going to be setting up various education programs, various training programs. We've been approved as the Kickstart as part of the new scheme that's come out for young people getting into employment. And that's something I've got a lot of experience of really supporting people of what's their career aspirations, what do they want to achieve. And again, trying to give them sort of relevant experiences to build their CV, build their portfolio, but work out what is the right thing for them. So that's a lot of the individual side. Long term, we've got some big plans around specific training programs, looking at what the skills gap are in the city's region at the moment, and how we can support the region to recover from COVID, but also developing people's skills around that. And then also supporting businesses with their HR, with their strategy, rethinking, sort of, Sean and I have a very similar approach, that people do have the answers, but they just might need a little bit of help working through them answers, working through them solutions. So as part of it, we'll offer coaching, we'll offer mentoring, but particularly it can be very lonely as a leader. I'm sure you've probably had that come through other podcasts. And particularly at the moment, everyone is looking to their leader for answers, for solutions, for when's this all going to get back to normal? Have we got a future? What are we going to be doing? So one of the things that Sean particularly will be looking at offering is supporting people with that, to help them work through the next few months. And does their, again, let's say before, the vision mightn't change, but does their strategy maybe need rethinking? So we've just had a new website pulled together and some various marketing material that I'll send over. But yeah, really, really excited.
Yeah, good. So obviously, like Dawn said, that's all going to be available for you to click on and check out as well. So it's exciting. So in the last minute, so tell me how you stay on the forefront of your journey. So do you do any learning development? How do you stay, because it's a lifelong journey, isn't it? So how do you stay ahead and develop yourself?
Yeah, I reflect every week. So, you know, sort of one of my downsides is I can be very self-critical. And sometimes I think, so I have to make sure I take that time out to sort of look at what the week's brought, how I've dealt with things, could you have dealt with it differently? Exercise is massive for me, sort of that's my time to switch off. And I think when you are in this sort of role, it is important to get that time and keep yourself physically fit and mentally well. And then I also put a couple of people around me. So I think that's why we're keen to do the mentorship. So I'm fortunate I've got 2 people around me that sort of mentor me, because you have to be open for that sort of, not criticism, but sort of ability to reflect and have other people's input, because quite often you just get in that mode of, right, make a decision, let's implement it, let's make sure everybody on the ground's okay, and it's easy to neglect yourself. So that's my approach.
Amazing. Awesome. So, ladies and gents, that's 20 minutes. And thank you so much, Dawn, for your time. If you've been watching us on the YouTube channel, make sure you hit subscribe and hit the bell, because you'll get notifications of everything that goes out. Remember, on a Monday, my vlogs come out at 6 a.m. And on Wednesday, the podcast goes live at 6 a.m. as well. If you're listening to us on your podcast provider, make sure you hit follow and pass it all forwards and share in the comments below your takeaways from this amazing episode. So Dawn, thank you so much. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, take care. Thanks a lot.
That's okay. So ladies and gents, see you next week. Bye.